Hi, hi, I'm Professor Steve Rowe. I'm a real paleontologist, and you're watching Real Paleontology. You'll get no AI generated BS here. Anyway, in today's episode of my Paleo Bite series, we're going to take a look at a big and much debated question. What makes us human? What clearly distinguishes we modern humans, Homo sapiens, from all other animal species? The answers are probably not as simple as you might think. Now, if the question was what distinguishes us from our closest living relatives, the answers are easy, right? You likely picked them without a moment's thought. Unlike other living apes, we walk on two legs and we have way bigger brains. But if we're talking about our closer fossil relatives, then the differences are definitely not so clear cut. It's been obvious for decades that our ancestors were fully bipedal for at least the last couple of million years. It's also long been clear that at least one of our fossil relatives, the Neanderthal, had a brain that was on average as big or bigger than ours. And if this very recent new paper, published just this month, is on the money, then there were at least two other bipedal apes with brains at least as big as ours. Now, the fact that their brains were as big as ours doesn't mean that they necessarily worked in the same way. In effect, there may have been differences, perhaps big differences, but this is certainly a debated issue, and one that I would like to address in another episode. But today I want to take a shot at what is perhaps the single most obvious feature that clearly separates us from all of our fossil relatives: our tiny little faces. Compared to all of our closest relatives, we modern humans have totally strange, retracted, and strangely childlike faces. We are undoubtedly the odd ones out. Even other members of our own genus, Homo, would have thought that we looked like unfortunately overgrown infants. And for the time being, this, perhaps together with our underdeveloped brow ridges, is the single most obvious physical feature that defines us. In a sense, you could say that our small faces are what makes us modern humans. Not only is it clear that our faces have shrunk, it's also clear that they're still shrinking. And this is clearly the flip side of a previous video wherein we asked, why do Neanderthals have such big noses and big forward projecting faces? Where we went in one direction, the Neanderthals obviously went in the other. Now, my interest in this area of research began over a decade ago when myself and a bunch of colleagues put together this paper, The Craniomandibular Mechanics of Being Human. More on that later. So, over the years, a bunch of explanations have been offered to explain the ever shrinking modern human face. Firstly, we'll look at what is probably the oldest and most widely touted. From the very get go, a common argument has been that our faces began to shrink with the advent of improved technologies for food processing. Basically, the invention of tools for slicing, pounding, and of course, fire for cooking food. The reasoning being that we didn't need big, powerful jaws to bite, chew, and process tough foods once we'd acquired all this newfangled Stone Age high tech. But I've got a couple of problems with this interpretation. Firstly, in our 2010 paper, using pretty darn sophisticated computer modelling of some fossil relatives, as well as a chimpanzee and a gorilla, we showed that modern humans can actually bite pretty darn hard. Not only that, we didn't just have the hypothetical capacity to bite hard, but our skulls could well and truly handle the high stresses that such hard biting would impose. The only species that very clearly outperformed us was this guy, Paranthropus boisei, aka Nutcracker Man. But then this dude, with his absolutely massive cheekbones and jaw closing muscles, was a total outlier who outperformed everyone else. And then in a second paper in 2018, we ran another analysis. This time we included two even closer relatives, Neanderthals and a Homo heidelbergensis, as well as 10 modern humans. Among these modern humans were recent hunter-gatherers and a Stone Age modern human. Again, we found that the modern humans, by and large, could bite just as hard without showing any more stress or strains in their skulls than either of these two big-faced members of our own genus. This has been further corroborated in more recent work, such as this by Najazde and colleagues just this year. They showed that the front teeth of modern humans were just as well adapted, if not better adapted, to handle high stress as those of Homo heidelbergensis. Now, I have to mention another paper published in 2018 by Godhino et al. These guys also ran computer simulations. Here, a single modern human model was compared to a single model of Homo heidelbergensis. These guys also found that the modern human could generate relatively high bite forces. However, they found that their heidelbergensis exhibited less strain and concluded that it was therefore better adapted to resist hard bite forces. I'm not convinced by this. All 12 of our models included the lower jaws and fully reconstructed musculature. Secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, the single modern human cranium used by Godhino et al. Was that of a 74-year-old man from Hull. And unless the old man from Hull had strictly adhered to a so-called paleo diet throughout his life, then we're not really comparing apples to apples here. Like I said, in our analysis, we had a bunch of modern humans, including recent hunter-gatherers and a 30,000-year-old European. And I repeat, we found no obvious difference in the levels or distribution of strain in the skulls between modern humans, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthals. And the modern humans were biting just as hard or harder. In short, I think our comparisons and results are more convincing. Another point I'd raise here is that it's increasingly clear that Homo heidelbergensis and especially Neanderthals also had the use of fire and other tools for food processing. And they had these for tens, if not hundreds of millennia. In the case of Neanderthals, they likely had these tools available to them for as long as modern humans did. They could pre-process and cook their food, yet their faces didn't shrink. In fact, they actually got bigger. Now, the counter-argument here is that this capacity for hard biting in modern humans is a spandrel. That is, it's an accidental consequence of reducing the face, and that we can't actually use this ability. It's certainly true that shortening the face automatically increases leverage and hence bite force. This is just basic physics. And I have to admit that before we had generated the results for our 2018 paper, I thought this was possible, although unlikely. Anyway, the argument goes like this. In short, as a result of reducing our faces, our modern human jaws are more likely to dislocate when biting really hard. Again, the implication here is that although we can hypothetically bite hard, in reality, if we actually try to, we will dislocate our jaw. But even in theory, this only applies if we're biting on one side at the very back teeth. It does not apply to biting at the front teeth. Moreover, to the best of my knowledge, there is no evidence of jaw dislocation in the human fossil record. All this said, it's certainly clear that since the advent of agriculture around 10,000 years ago, shrinking of the human face has accelerated. There is no doubt that here we are looking at changes in diet as a cause. Our ever-increasing proclivity for softer, easier foods has made our small faces even smaller. There's also no doubt that by eating more resistant, less heavily processed foods, our jaws can become bigger and stronger. And this has advantages above and beyond giving us a more square-jawed superhero countenance. As pointed out in this 2020 paper by Khan et al., diet-related jaw shrinkage can result in problems ranging from a lack of adequate space for our wisdom teeth to constricted airways. Still, no amount of heavy chewing is going to give you the forward-projecting face and huge nose of a Neanderthal. And the shrinking of our modern human face and nose, long before the advent of agriculture or McDonald's, has seriously undesirable consequences. There are books written on this subject, so we can be pretty sure that there must have been some advantage. There are two other proposed advantages to having a short face that I think are well worth looking at. One is that it resulted in an expanded vocal repertoire. Basically, that reducing the size of the face resulted in a capacity for we modern humans to produce a wider range of sounds than so-called archaic humans. Barney et al. 2012 here came to this conclusion based on their reconstruction of a Neanderthal vocal tract. Maybe, but in 2013, together with Ruggero Anastasio and colleagues, we published this paper. Here we reconstructed the hyoid bone of a Neanderthal and a modern human from high-resolution micro-CT. We also reconstructed the associated musculature and ran simulations to compare their performance. Now, the hyoid is a very special bone. It's the only bone in the human body that's not attached to any other bones, but it is the site of attachment for a bunch of muscles that operate the tongue, and it's clearly very important in speech and language. Anyway, long story short, we found no clear differences in performance between the two species. This doesn't prove that Neanderthals had precisely the same capacity for speech as Homo sapiens. There certainly remain arguments for and against, but it's definitely consistent with the hypothesis that they could speak. And even if their voices were a little more constrained, it's difficult to see how shortening the face would have improved that. Another explanation for our diminished faces was offered by Lacruz and colleagues in 2019. They proposed that it facilitated a greater range of facial expressions and argued that it was linked to increased sociality. Basically, that together with reduction in the size of our brow ridges, a small face allows us to deliver more nuanced, non-verbal expressions of emotion. A related argument is that facial reduction goes hand in hand with a suite of other changes, suggesting selection for reduced aggression in modern humans, as hypothesized here by Richard Wrangham, also in 2019. This may have been driven by female selection for less aggressive men. I'll end this little video here. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please like and subscribe. In future episodes of my Paleo Bite series, we'll look at other features that might make us human.